Hi, today I'm going to be talking about Zodiac's march through the different Zodiac signs and the different costumes and tools he uses, depending on the sign he's in and what he's up to. Hi, my name is Michael Bartlett, Master Metaphysical Astrologer, and I offer metaphysical astrology and astrological and experiential coaching to provide you with the profound transformation you seek and the empowerment you need. Please check out my website, coremichael.com, for more information. So we're talking about Saturn. So it's that long line and like a big H with a line through it. Or if you think of it, you flip it back over, it actually is very similar to the glyph we use for Jupiter. Saturn stays in a sign for about 2.5 years, and it takes a total of 29.5 years to go around through all of the signs. And as many of we often talk about this period when we're around 29, 30 years old, known as the Saturn return, which repeats around 58, 59. And then again, when we're pushing 90, we have another Saturn return. These are times when we find a return to our sense of authority. We find a deeper sense of who we are and how we manage our lives. And I think it really is a way of cementing in who we actually are. Saturn goes retrograde for about 4.5 months. And if you think about it, when you look out in the night sky, for those of you who are night viewers, Saturn is that last planet we can actually see with our naked eye, meaning no telescope, no binoculars, no additional devices to help. Actually, every once in a while, you can see Uranus. If it gets close enough, you can actually see it as well. But because Saturn is that last planet we can see with our naked eye, it is the last planet in classical astrology. There are only the first 7 planets that are covered when we talk about traditional astrology from the past classical astrology, because those individuals are not able to see anything further than that. So in that sense, it's our outer limits. It's this strength. It's this, when you think about these bands that are around Saturn, it actually represents this sort of ring past knot theory that you have to do a certain amount of work or pay attention to a certain amount of details in your life in order to move on to the next step. It's like when you're in school and you haven't done the right amount of work for the year in which you're in, teachers may decide, hey, we need to hold you back a year. This is a very Saturnian process. It represents our boundaries, the limits that we have in our life, as well as our teeth, our bones, our skin, these structures and our foundations that basically hold us together and keep us whole. I like to say that it reveals how our structure and how we plan, how we meet the limitations through life, which we need to deal with. And Saturn's that sort of planet where I would really say life is a biatch. But if you do the work that's necessary, you can make things happen. You may even see the saying sometimes, if you want your dreams to work, you need to work for your dreams. This is a very Saturn process, this idea that you have to earn something, you have to work towards something you really want that's meaningful for you. And of course, when we're talking about this, we're talking about this band of constellations out in space beyond our solar system, which provide a backdrop that we're able to see our planets from our vantage point here on Earth. And therefore, that is how we see and experience these energies on Earth for each of us individually. Our first sign that we come to, of course, is Aries. And one of the things you're going to notice about Saturn is that he's old. He's got his beard, he's got a bald head, he's hunched over a little bit. It's not an easy life. Saturn doesn't perceive life to be easy. There's just always something that needs to be dealt with. There's something that needs to be resolved. Saturn in Aries is not an easy placement because Aries really wants to move forward. It doesn't want to have any boundaries. Does not want to have any limits. And Saturn is, hey, wait a minute. This is what needs to be done to make things happen. Say, as an Aries individual, you might want to go out hiking or you might want to go out on an adventure somewhere. Saturn's going to make sure that you have the right tools and things available to you. Do you have the right hiking shoes? Do you have crampons if you're going to be on the snow or in the ice? Do you have walking sticks that's going to help aid you in the process? Do you have, depending on if you're doing rappelling, do you have the ropes that are necessary? Do you have all the other aspects that are needed to take care of things? It's going to make this Saturn in Aries is going to be a little bit more thoughtful. It's going to maybe, as I like to say, it's where angels fear to tread. Saturn's going to make sure that it's probably not as fearful or as risk taking. And this is not really an easy placement for Saturn because there's just like this push and go. So sometimes I would imagine there could be a little bit of frustration with this placement and this energy. And Saturn moves over into Taurus. Saturn tends to like the earth signs because they're dependable, they're structured, there's a form to them, which is really important when it comes to Saturn. Taurus is one of those signs that has to deal with the forms of things, forms of our resources. As we can see, this is in the placement of a safe deposit box, bank room, and there's money, there's gold. So this is someone who's really going to work hard towards amassing a fortune or amassing resources that end up taking care of themselves and ground themselves into this process of dealing with responsibility, because that is one of the aspects with Saturn. It's being responsible. And Saturn moves over into the Aries sign of Gemini. We can see he's dressed up, ready to go fencing. This is probably someone who would be really adept at using words in an appropriate manner. Many of the people I've met over the years who have Saturn in Gemini are people who are a bit of linguists. They understand all the rules of language. What are the right ways to communicate? Often, even maybe even correcting other people when they perceive that they're not speaking properly or saying their sentence structure properly. Again, you're noticing here we've got the communicative Gemini and we have the structuring of Saturn coming together. And so when these two come together, this is this real interesting use of language for purpose. And that'd be another aspect I would talk about Saturn. There's a purposefulness about Saturn. Sometimes it doesn't make sense in the moment. It might even feel very punishing. But in the long run, when you look back, you can go, oh, I'm so thankful for Saturn, making sure that I took care of these things. Because the idea is if you follow Saturn's guidance, you will actually have a better structure as life goes on. It's almost like that savings account that you have that you put in that $50 or $100 a week or a month or whatever. It's just that thing that's going to continue to build. Of course, that's a little more of that Saturn and Taurus, but I'm talking about the Saturn process in general. The idea is that it slowly builds, it's slowly understood. Saturn doesn't move quickly. Saturn here in Gemini is again another one of those things that's a little bit of an oxymoron, because if you think of Gemini as being more hummingbird, then you can see that this might be a hummingbird that goes a little more slowly, a little bit more deliberately, makes a point of exactly which flower and which person it wants to go to. Then Saturn moves into the sign of Cancer. Saturn in the water signs is a little bit interesting. And especially when we get to the last one, I'll talk a little bit more about this and where Saturn is now in the signs, which is the sign of Pisces. But when it's in Cancer, this is someone who's going to be, who wouldn't want to leave their child with someone who has Saturn in Cancer? This is going to be someone who's going to make sure the household is taken care of properly. The kids, the food is there for the kids. The house is clean and kept up. And there is a certain way of taking care of the clan, maybe even being very protective. This could maybe even be like a little bit of a mafia boss in a sense. Hey, I'm going to take care of my family over anyone else's. And that's sometimes what can happen with Saturn, where it can become a little more maybe polarized towards other people. Then Saturn moves into the expressive sign of Leo. Again, this is an interesting spot because if we think about it, how do we contain fire? We contain fire by keeping it in a fireplace. We keep it in a fire pit. So this would be someone who could really produce, someone who over a long run would maybe have a huge body of work, of creative work, paintings, ceramics, whatever kind of a creative endeavor this individual might be into. There's going to be this ongoing understanding that practice makes perfect. So whether that is in rulership, as we see here with Saturn wearing the kingly robes of Leo, this would be a real strong leadership position, someone who's going to learn through the process of right and wrong of dealing with people. Really learning how to regulate one's flame would be important, and knowing just the right amount of fuel to add to the flame to make things work. Of course, over time. This isn't something one gets right away. And in that sense, I would actually almost liken Saturn to the sun in astrology, meaning that this is something that takes time to grow into. This isn't something you pop out of you're born and then all of a sudden you just are that. These are things that take time. These are processes that unfold over time. Saturn in Virgo is quite phenomenal. It is the ability to manage all the little aspects. This would be someone who'd be a great hospital administrator or organizational structure, or someone who manages a lot of people and resources and understands how things need to be managed and worked with in ways so that everything is done for the highest good. This is going to be a lot of trial and error with Saturn in Virgo. Let me try out this way. Does that work? No, that doesn't work. Okay, what if I modify it this way? And then maybe that'll work. And so it's just, again, taking the time. Saturn is also in ancient Saturn is also referred to as Chronos, and Chronos is time. So this is another thing that's very important about Saturn. This is about the time that things unfold. Again, look at the figure. This is an older man. This doesn't matter whether you're a man or a woman. Of course, if you're a woman wearing this is something that over time you grow into. And then when you get to a certain age, things begin to make sense, especially after that first Saturn return and after the second Saturn return, there's just an embodiment of self that comes in. And this happens for all the signs in regards to Saturn return. I want to thank Christine Cianci, the amazing artist who hand painted each of the Astro Theater figures in oil on plastic, scanned them all. We end up taking them, putting them in this book, Astro Theater, a revolutionary look at the ancient art of astrology. You can pick it up through Kindle, Apple, or even from your local bookstore. Thank you, Christine. Saturn moving into the next air sign of Libra is going to provide this right relationship, being sure of the rules of etiquette, the rules of creating harmony, the structure of how to interact with people in a way that brings about harmony, that brings about a certain balance in understanding that it's not one way or the other. This is, I would think over time, maybe when one is younger, you're going to experience things maybe on one side of the scale. And then as you get older, you begin to incorporate these two sides of the situation. When we listen to our friends talking about what's going on in their lives, we begin to understand there's two sides to the story. So Saturn would be very good here in Libra to help someone understand that there's a larger story than just one's own perspective. If you like what I'm offering here, please hit the like button. Please share with your friends. And of course, please comment and ask your questions. I love interacting with you. I'm enjoying hearing what your individual experience is and how you experience each of your various planets through these signs. And of course, here with Saturn, I want to hear from you as well. Also, please go to my website, cormichael.com. When you sign up for my newsletter, you will automatically get a free retrograde calendar for the year, as well as the opportunity to see me for a free session, which I offer from time to time as my clients open up. Now we have Saturn in Scorpio. This is specifically when we talked earlier about life is a biatch and then you die. I like to say with Scorpio, life's that and you are reborn. So this is an ongoing process of dealing with the dramas and the intensities of life and finding a way to bring a bit of neutrality into that. As I often say, when it comes to Scorpio, I enjoy the saying that I learned from Aaron Sullivan, which is that Scorpio has to get sick and tired of itself. Saturn in Scorpio is going to help one learn how to get out of the maze of the drama, how to get out of the structures of those things that entangle us. Because one of the other aspects that's really beautiful about Saturn is a certain sort of neutrality. If you've ever watched the movie The Matrix, at the very end of it, when the bullets are coming at him and he simply says no, there's no anger, there's no frustration. The bullets stop. He picks one out, he looks at it, and then they just all drop. It gives me goosebumps talking about it. But this is an aspect of Saturn in Scorpio where it begins to understand its own power, and that sometimes one doesn't need to do something in order to make a profound shift. Sometimes it's actually just sitting in the space of what it is that's going on and being present to the intensity and realizing that you're okay and you're going to make it through. I'd love to hear from those of you who have Saturn in Scorpio, what your experience is, as well as, of course, each of these signs. Then Saturn leaves the Valley of Death and goes on into the spaceship, traveling the world. This is going to be someone who is a seasoned traveler. This is going to be a profound philosopher of life, someone who seeks those tidbits of information that gives life greater understanding, that gives one the greater understanding of how life operates. This is almost like a grand architect is what I would think when it comes to Saturn in Sagittarius. because it can learn how everything kind of fits together in a certain way, which is profound. This would be a great tour guide, by the way. This is someone who would be good at making sure that people don't get lost on journey, grabbing someone by the scruff of the neck when they get too close to the edge and pulling them back, whether that's in one's search for philosophies or whether that is actually on a mountain trail. These are the things I would perceive that would go on with Saturn in Sagittarius. Then Saturn moves into his first sign he rules, which is Capricorn. Saturn in Capricorn is a major architect of business, of success, of understanding what needs to be done to reach one's goals, to reach a level of social standing, a level of one's bank account, type style of home. This would be someone who is a not necessarily a mover and a shaker, but someone who maybe you might know some Saturn and Capricorns, and they can be someone who would be unassuming, of course, depending on how their other planets are set up and their own personality. But it could be that person who's fairly quiet and sits in the background and doesn't interact with others. I'm thinking also of that show where the owner of the company goes in and pretends to be a new employee to see how his business is working, because this would be someone who's really always looking at how to make things better, how to make the business run more smoothly and more profitably. And of course, that requires making sure that one's resources are taken care of. It sounds like I'm talking about Virgo here a bit, but with this Capricorn, it is a masterful position. This is the final earth sign. It has that aspect of the sea goat down in the water, feeling what it is that's going on with the collective. Then it is the goat on the ground, where it's dealing with the realities of the physical daily life. And then there is that mountain goat that is up at the top of the mountain and is the king or queen of all he or she or they purvey. So this is a very strong and powerful placement. Saturn then moves over into the second sign that it rules, which is the sign of Aquarius. Now, this is where we really get to understand that there is a classical view of astrology, in that before modern times, Saturn only ruled Capricorn and Aquarius. Uranus had not come in yet. And so this is the traditional view of Aquarius. Many people don't include Uranus, and also a lot of people who don't include Saturn for Aquarius. And I think either way, if you're not looking at both of these planets in regards to Aquarius, you're only getting 50% of the perspective. So here, this is someone who understands organization, and understands that's moved through this Capricorn. If you think of each of these signs as being developmental, there are things that Saturn learns as it goes through the signs. This is why it is so pivotal when we have a Saturn return, because it is having Saturn go through each of the signs and learning how to do all these things I've been talking about in this video throughout each sign, and gaining knowledge, gaining understanding, gaining one's structure of self so that one can succeed, one can grow, one can be one's archetypal understanding self. And especially here in the sign of Aquarius, the archetypal self is really important because, again, we have the rulership of Saturn and the rulership of Uranus, Uranus being the archetypal individual and Saturn being the structure of the individual. These people would be great at being president of a lodge, or someone who manages an organization, or someone who is a Mason. This is someone who understands the importance of right human relationship and the structures needed to make it work. Then Saturn moves into probably one of the most interesting signs that he gets to travel through. And I don't mean to belittle any of the others or demean any of the other signs in this regard. And maybe it's just because it's part of my generation and I wear this mark as well. But Saturn in Pisces is a confounding thing. One of the images you can consider is a sandcastle on the beach. And this is when you build a sandcastle on the beach, this is going to happen, but this is what's a lot that happens in Saturn and Pisces as well, is we build these structures and they're washed away. So it's helping us understand, hey, maybe I need to build a structure a little farther away from the water, or maybe I need to add something that's going to stabilize the sand against the water so the structure will remain. But the truth is, when it comes to Pisces, Pisces is not about structure. Pisces is the sign opposite from Virgo. It is absolutely not about structure, and it's about formlessness, which is very different than Taurus as well. So Saturn here is trying to create structures and trying to understand things, but it's not really going to work because it's a whole different realm of experience. These are individuals who may step into metaphysics. These are individuals who would look at ancient knowledge, ancient understanding, working with meditation, learning that through daily meditation, Saturn's a daily process. Of course, it feels a little bit more like I'm talking about Virgo in this sense, but it is that opposite sign. But when someone with Saturn and Pisces sits and does what it needs to be present to what is, almost like we talked about with Scorpio, this is going to be an individual who has a profound understanding of what is going on. When we think about it, someone in a meditative state, while they're there and it appears like nothing's going on, the energy and the awareness just continues to expand and is able to expand in areas that we do not think of on in our daily lives, because this is that threshold place, that liminal space where we're stepping into that which is transcendent, that which is formless, as I spoke a minute ago. So this can be a very profound situation and placement for an individual. And I think really one of the ones that takes a much longer period of time to understand. It's also where Saturn is right now as we speak here in September of 2024. I want to thank you for joining me today. Again, please hit share with your friends, comment, ask me questions. I really want to hear what your experience is, and maybe if it piques your interest or it piques your questions, please visit my website, coremichael.com. I want to thank you for joining me today. Have a wonderful day and learn to work with the structures that you have in your life so that you can build the life that you seek, so that you can create that wonderful sense of self within you. Thank you so much for tuning in today and have a great day.